words. Then Advisor Yu said that you can understand the owner because he does not trust Qin Cho-hin, and therefore left him here, because what can some little one do? Qin Cho-hin thought it was funny, and if Counselor Yu knew the age difference between them. Then suddenly, Counselor Yu told the young man that there was a message for him from the northern part of Jiangsu province. Qin Cho-hin thought that he must have received a message from the demonic school. The young man opened the message. There was a letter and some kind of package. Qin Cho-hin opened the letter. It said that the author of the letter was told at school that he could send the letter to someone. But other than Qin Cho-hin, the author of the letter had no one to write to. The author wrote that he was doing well and would visit Qin Cho-hin as soon as the time came. The young man realized that Ye Haryun wrote to him. He thought that he was coming out. He managed to restrain his bloody nature. The young doctor thought that for sure Haryun has not risen in status. Qin Cho-hin thought that not every member of the demon school could simply send a letter to other places. So, he is not far from the position of a young leader. The young man thought that what Ye Haryun achieved should have taken at least 5 years. What has changed? Qin Cho-hin only taught him the basics of life and society. There, Haryun wrote that thanks to Qin Cho-hin's words, think 3 times before killing a person. His anger decreased significantly. The young man concluded that Ye Haryun was a scary guy. It probably wasn't easy for him to cope with the instinct of the deadly star of heaven. On the last tapes, Ye Haryun wrote for Qin Cho-hin to open the silk bag. There is a gift. Qin Cho-hin opened the bag. There was something that looked like a metal bracelet. The bracelet was in the shape of a dragon biting its own tail. The young doctor thought that such a thing fit the style of the demonic school. Qin Cho-hin wondered if this was the same thing he had read about in the novel. He thought that the bracelet was originally supposed to be worn by Ye Haryun, black web bracelet, bloody death. Qin Cho-hin looked at the bracelet and doubted that Haryun really sent such a valuable thing by letter. Suddenly, the bracelet activated in the young man's hands. The bloody death black net bracelet is one of the Sky Demon's secret weapons that he used in the novel. Invisible strings from the bracelet are stretched and then cut the enemy's throat. At a critical moment, using a bracelet, you can create a trap and drive several hundred martial artists into it. In the original novel, Ye Haryun received the black bloody death net bracelet only after he barely defeated the black light shadow weirdo. Qin Cho-hin wondered if things were so calm for Ye Haryun that he sent him a magic bracelet. He thought that if so, then Haryun had become friends with the black light eccentric, because it was simply impossible for the current Ye Haryun to take the bracelet from the eccentric by force. Qin Cho-hin concluded that Ye Haryun became a disciple of the black light eccentric, which is simply surprising because everything happened 4 years earlier. The young doctor looked at his hand and noticed that now the bracelet was dangling on his hand. But when he grew up, it would be just right. He wondered why he needed the bracelet, since Ye Haryun could use it himself. Qin Cho-hin thought that if he were an ordinary person, he would not even understand the full value of the bracelet. Perhaps he would simply sell it. After Qin Cho-hin received a letter from Ye Haryun, he wrote a response asking the most common questions such as, is he eating well? How is his health? Suddenly, the archer's daughter ran up to the young man. He asked her what happened and why she was so out of breath. The archer's daughter answered Qin Cho-hin that he needed to go with her. He needed to cure some. Qin Cho-hin and the archer's daughter went to help the injured man. They ran quickly. The young doctor noticed that his body was as light as a feather. He thought that he had never imagined that learning the principle of the 3 foundations would create such a big impact. The young man thought that now it would be worthwhile to concentrate the technique of the 5 elements, wind, and the new ice technique in the legs. His speed increased even more. The archer's daughter was very surprised by such skill, so she asked Qin Cho-hin how long he had been studying martial arts. He replied that about 6 months. The archer's daughter thought that Qin Cho-hin was a real beast because he had made such incredible progress in just 6 months. Qin Cho-hin asked how long they still needed to leave. The archer's daughter pointed to the cave and said that they had already arrived. The young doctor asked the archer's daughter whether the victim was in the cave. She replied yes. Qin Cho-hin asked the archer's daughter how she found the victim in the cave because it was completely dark there. She told him to just follow her. The heroes walked further through the cave. Suddenly, a light illuminated them. The young doctor asked where the light came from in such a place. The girl replied that the room was well designed. Pearl-shaped lamps hung on the walls of the cave. Qin Cho-hin touched the lamp and asked how such expensive pearls were made. Suddenly, the young man asked the archer's daughter where the patient was. She told him to follow her. Suddenly, they saw a wounded dog. Qin Cho-hin asked the girl if this was the victim in need of help, she meant. The archer's daughter replied that yes, she meant the dog and that it was badly injured. Qin Cho-hin replied that everything was fine, but he would examine him now. The young doctor began to examine the dog. The dog makes sounds, signaling that he is in pain. Chin-cho-kin replied to be patient. The young man noticed 3 ropes around the dog's neck and noticed that it looked like some kind of sign. Chin-cho-hin remembered how Counselor Yuho taught him the symbols of each clan. The young doctor noted that 5 knots are the sign of the head of the clan. The girl asked if this was the dog of the head of Cabana. Chin-cho-kin said that this is a messenger dog. He is trained to transmit data from the head. The archer's daughter noticed that there are birds, and they are much faster and more effective as messengers. Why then do you need a dog? The young doctor replied that birds only fly to designated places, although he had heard that birds with high intelligence are used. Chin-cho-hin said that although dogs are slower in speed, they can move in packs and overcome intricate paths the first time. The young doctor said that he only knew the basics about veterinary medicine, and therefore he needed to find a specialist. He said that his efforts benefited him as a charlatan. The archer's daughter asked who they would turn to. Chin-cho-kin replied that he did not know. He would provide first aid, and then they would take him to the infirmary and find someone there. The young doctor tried to lift the dog, but it growled and tried to bite him. The archer's daughter said that the dog's name is Hwang-gu. She doesn't know the details, but it looks like he can't leave here anywhere. The girl stroked the dog and asked it to calm down, but the dog just growled. Chin-cho-hin thought that in the novel, Kaban is destined to face many difficulties. Each incident will have a fatal impact on them. The young doctor asked the archer's daughter if she knew what happened to the dog. She replied that no, but before that she had often met him in the area, and today she was disturbed by his whining for help. Chin-cho-hin said that this dog is smart. The archer's daughter replied that she was aware that the dog belonged to Kaban, but had no idea that this dog was the chief's messenger. The boys she used to play with called him Hwanga. That's all he knows. The girl said that she was hunting in the forest and came across this wounded dog. The young doctor said that due to external wounds, blood poisoning and a strong inflammatory reaction began. He has a dislocated kneecap, a fractured tibia, and tenosynovitis of the biceps brachii muscle. Chin-cho-hin said that after examination, it could be concluded that the dog was using its front paws too much. The pain is incredibly hellish, but the dog does not give up. Chin-cho-hin thought that this dog was better than any man. The young man wondered through what message this dog had exhausted himself so much. The young doctor thought that the enemy did not use a sword. He threw something sharp at the dog. Someone tried to catch the messenger dog alive. The archer's daughter asked why the enemy did this, since it would be more effective to take away the message by killing the dog. The young man replied that he was asking the same question. Chin-cho-hin asked what they would do next. If they don't take the dog to the infirmary, they will have to bring someone from the infirmary here. After the young man's words, Hwang-gu's dog began to growl loudly. Chin-cho-hin and the archer's daughter began to think that the dog really understood them. The young doctor asked the dog what he suggested they do. If he doesn't want anyone else to come here, wouldn't it be better for them all to convey the message together? God, what a strange forest. I've never been here. I don't understand. Do you even know where we are? I personally do not, and I will be very glad if you explain this to me. Well, what's so complicated about it anyway? I thought to myself. Don't worry. I'll walk through this forest with my eyes closed. What are you even talking about? She said with laughter in her voice. And you understand, no? Of course not. I don't know, so it's better if I follow you. She said, smiling, and followed the path through the forest. We followed the road that the girl showed. After about 15 minutes, my dog began to twitch very much and try to say something to her. Wait, I need to tell you something. Hwang-gu seems to want to show us the way. He points in the direction. Is it true? Do you think the dog is a better guide than us? I don't really believe this. Hwang-gu, lead us in. Do you want to go there? I asked the dog. I completely trusted this dog because he is already like a dear person to me, and this is really so. Ready! Let's go! I shouted at the top of my voice, looking at her, with the dog on my shoulders. My thoughts overwhelmed me, and I no longer thought about anything, only about what would happen next. This frightened me and gave me even more motivation to find out. Can you trust me with your life? She said in a trembling voice. I understood that she was scared, and I was also incredibly scared, but I didn't show it because she would be even more afraid. I thought for a long time, but then I said, of course I can. I trust you. Don't worry so much. Everything will be fine. I said one thing and thought about something else. I was still a little scared. I saw the calmness in her eyes. She calmed down, and I'm glad about it because 5 minutes ago she was very afraid. But now she is confident in herself. How wonderful it is. While I was thinking, I heard a scream and already shuddered. What is that? And this is her. Great, then take it and I'll shoot. Well, I rely on you with all my heart. You can do it, I shouted. I was very afraid myself, but I trusted her. I just trusted another person with my life. I'm sure she won't let me down. She will do everything to protect me. I can protect her. I definitely have to do this. She trusts me and I won't let her down. Thoughts away, and in my head there is only protection. And my bow, let's begin. A dark night began in the forest. My companion disappeared in this forest, and I looked for her with my eyes, but it's strange. I can't find her. A sharp wind and the leaves commanded. Someone ran so fast that I didn't even see it. How is this possible? In any case, we need to figure this out urgently. I promised to protect. Here she is. I found her. She's so fast I didn't expect this girl to be so fast. In any case, I need to run, but my thoughts do not leave me. So that's it. I got ready and ran with all my might. I can. They believe in me and I have to do it, otherwise why am I here? All thoughts suddenly disappeared and her legs moved behind her. Oh God, why is she so fast? We need more, even more speed. Come on, you can do it. I ran as fast as I could and still it wasn't enough to catch up with her. I don't try enough. I have to give everything I have to run enough to protect her. After all, protection and self-defense are different complex things, but I promised because I have to protect, but still self-defense is much easier. How many thoughts? I think a lot. Protecting the life of another person is much more difficult than protecting your own. The great words of my teacher will always remain in my head. And indeed, everything happens as he said. Yes, especially on a night like this. Fortunately, the wind direction is normal and the moon shines dimly. There are both disadvantages and advantages. You need to use these advantages to the maximum. How I would like for us to not be caught by the enemy until the end of the journey, but I think it's impossible. After all, there can be so many rasters and so many enemies, but I'm not forbidden to hope. What kind of sounds are these? She thought, and became wary. Suddenly, something dangerous would happen. She squeezed the bow tighter and was ready to act as soon as she saw the enemy. In the distance, she saw mountain birds flying up, scared of something or what. In her thoughts, I don't know if they pose a danger to us or not, but I'd better be on my guard. The birds were close, and they needed to be ready to repel the attack. The bow was already in the hands of the protecting girl. What next? Will they attack, or will they just fly? The birds suddenly changed their path and flew towards the dog at high speed. Are these our enemies? Or did they not like something? She noticed that the birds suddenly began to attack and thought, damn, they are flying straight to Huanggu. We urgently need to do something. Our hands were shaking, but we did what was necessary. There are only 5 birds, the girl said in her thoughts. What to do? The hands moved at high speed and reached for the arrows, while she only understood what was about to happen. She took 3 arrows between her fingers, and a plan came to mind. Her hands moved on their own. Her fingers clenched the arrows so tightly that it seemed to her that they would break. But she was still thinking about what to do with them, what plan her body had, which itself did what it wanted. Yeah, that's the plan. I'll start with the 3 in front, the perfect plan. Let's get started, she said, and pulled the arrows as hard as she could. Her head was afraid, but her hands were doing. She was very much afraid that she wouldn't get in. Despite so much training, she might not have done what she should because of fear. Pull yourself together, little rag, she said to herself, and focused on the birds. I will do it. I promised myself I will do it. After these words, she finally pulled herself together and began to aim. 3, 2, 1. She shot, and her heart froze for a split second. What if I didn't hit? This was the only thing she was very afraid of. Will they hit or not? That's all that worried her then. She looked very intently without taking her eyes off, as if her life depended on it. Yes, they are flying. The arrows are flying. She shot so quickly that she herself did not understand from the beginning where they were, and when she saw, all she could do was hope that they would hit. And so they arrived. Her heart stopped for a moment because she didn't understand exactly what had happened. She closed her eyes out of fear and was very afraid to open them and look at what she had done. Surprisingly, all the arrows hit the target, but she was afraid to look in the direction of the birds, afraid to see what she could not. What was it? The girl thought. From the sound of the arrows, she was very scared along with the dog. The speed was really very high. She was confused about what just happened, how and what had happened, so quickly that I began to feel cold sweat and trembling, and my pupils became very small. She raised her head and saw. Raising her eyes, she saw a tree, and on the tree the birds were shot down by arrows. She immediately understood what had happened and understood who did it. But the fear for her safety did not disappear. All the birds were shot down, but the girl's fear did not disappear. She still could not raise her eyes and look, but she also understood that this was most likely not the end. Realizing everything completely and clearly, she raised her head and looked at all these birds. She was no less scared than her friend. Her heart was pounding back and forth and did not calm down, and her cold sweat never disappeared. "Pull yourself together and pull yourself together. The best archer is protecting you," she said to herself, looking towards her friend. And she told the dog, "Don't worry, she will protect us at any cost." She really believed in it. "I see that she trusts her. I won't let her down," she said. Looking into each other's eyes, they realized that they were obliged to do everything in their power. And not only that, because each of them was doing something for the other. After that, she showed the gesture, "Follow me." And I also kept thinking about what else could happen. It was very scary, and I stood just looking at her because I couldn't take a single step. "Well, let's go," the girl thought. "Well, now you need to move. Before trouble comes, you need to leave." "Okay, we really need to go before—" Sounds appeared in the air again. "Are there really enemies again? How many are there? 10? 50? Unclear. These are not birds." And many shadows appeared. The girls could not understand what happened. Who were they? Some kind of weapon is flying in the air. And the shadows have cleared under the moon. These are some kind of ninjas. How many ninja were there? It's impossible to heal. As many as possible. As many enemies as I have to. They fly at them, my God, what will they do? What should I do with my heart in my heels and my body frozen in place, rooted to the spot? She said in a very trembling voice to herself. These were actually ninjas. They were very fast, so much so that the girls only saw their shadows, which gave them more fear and hopelessness. One of these friends looked up and saw fear. Her whole life flashed before her eyes. "What? Who is this?" she said to herself. The pupils again became like small dots of fear. "Oh my God, we urgently need to speed up. They are very fast and can catch up with me." She ran as fast as she could because she understood that she could now die along with her beloved dog. Her only hope was in her legs and her friend. The ninja were so persistent that they literally moved towards their goal with the speed of the wind, as if they did not do what was due, I would kill them. Or maybe they were paid well. It doesn't matter what you need to do. First, second, third, she couldn't count how many arrows she launched, how quickly and straight at them. It happens very quickly, and again she doesn't control her hands. The adrenaline is very high. It hits 1, 2. How many are there? Another one. She cannot stop and shoots a lot of arrows, although she is afraid. But she does it because she is obliged to save her friend and the dog, which is already like her own. The ninja began to notice that their brothers-in-arms were falling from arrows, but they were flying further. What kind of warriors are they who are afraid of the enemy? "We must do it and avenge our people," one of them shouted. Perhaps this is their commander? Turning her face to danger, the girl noticed how many people were falling. How can this be? What is the speed of the arrows? She was a little calmer after learning that her friend had dealt with so many warriors so quickly. She destroyed many, but not all. There are still a lot of them. Oh God, what to do with them behind the trees? Even though she was doing everything so quickly now, she still couldn't keep up with everyone. Come on, you can, she thought. She began to do it 2 or even 3 times faster. She tried to do everything with all her might and at full speed. 10th, 11th. She killed one after another. They didn't even have time to react. It was all quick and unnoticeable. Her eyes burned with the desire to save her life and the life of her friend and her dog. Imagine the enemy also knows martial arts and he knows how to protect vital organs. Do you want to ask what to do in this case? The words of the girl's sensei. You don't need to put your whole soul into each arrow. If the arrow wounds the enemy, he will slow down, and this will be to your advantage. So she launched arrows at everyone, took aim, but did not waste much time. And one more arrow, they fly one after another, and she begins to somehow like it. The adrenaline is so pleasant. She likes killing her enemies more and more. Although the ninjas die one by one, their fearless soul cannot be stopped. The arrows hit literally everything, legs, arms, bodies, heads, and they continued on, fearless towards their goal. True, the ninjas no longer flew, but crept up on the ground, and the steps were so quiet that not every person would hear. And the girl, too, did not stand still. She jumped from place to place and fired arrows in different directions, killing more and more enemies. That's right. It's not the lethality of the arrow that matters, but just the hits. And then their capabilities will become significantly smaller. Again, a new crowd, as many as possible already. She was already getting up to launch arrows at such speed and thought, when will this all end? While she was shooting at the enemies, a ninja suddenly approached her very carefully, and suddenly he pounced on her as if a dog had broken loose. His eyes burned and longed for the death of the one who killed his friends. She noticed with her peripheral vision that someone was swinging at her. There was no time to think because, as the coach said, he told her, don't be afraid of close combat. If your body gives up fear, you're finished. She remembered these words because she dodged and showed who the real fighter is. It was so fast that she herself didn't understand what happened, but she did it very confidently. Get stupid, ninja! She hit the enemy in the face with all her strength. From such a blow, he flew into a tree and would definitely not rise again. After this battle, she was very exhausted and could barely breathe, but she was still glad that it was all over, right? A bunch of ninja corpses lay on the ground and fluffy snow. How much blood was shed on this snow? But most likely all the enemies were hit or not. When she caught her breath a little, she thought about what kind of messages Huang or her friend had. Why did they need it so much? She felt that this was not all. It was not for nothing that she thought that there was someone else there she heard in the trees, and then saw a bunch of more enemies. Damn, Cheon-hee is in danger. I have to save her immediately. We need to act quickly and efficiently. I'm obliged to do everything in the best possible way. No! Things were bad. I needed to take more arrows. I was almost out of them. What can I do without arrows? Like without hands, I need to come up with something urgently. Running through the forest, she thought, damn, I'm the scariest here of all. There are a lot of enemies around. What if they attack me and my companion doesn't have time to react? Oh no! As I thought, the ninja is already near me! So close that it seemed to her that this was the end. She seemed numb with fear, and almost walked instead of running. The warrior ran after her and suddenly took out 3 very sharp shuriken from his pocket. In his thoughts there were only 2 words, kill, take away, as if a robot. Although his eyes were white, a spark was visible in them. He longed for death to his enemy. With her peripheral vision, she saw these animal eyes and her heart almost stopped from fear. And she also saw him. She saw his shurikens flying straight at her. Damn, what should I do? They are flying at insane speed, but I'm just a messenger. I won't do anything. Some flew by, but she was still scared. What if she and the dog got hit? The shuriken made a very loud sound that would drown out the ears of an ordinary person. They are right behind her back, and she doesn't know what to do because her friend never reacted. I'm very scared because of this. Is everything okay with her? She ran, turned around, and made circles just to survive. She thought only about this and then about nothing at all because fear filled her head instead of thoughts. She ran with all her might, but it seems that they will soon catch up with her and finish her off because the ninja is much smarter and faster than her. These warriors ran after her for a long time and were already furious. Like, as long as you can run, our warriors are getting tired every second. Yes, 1-, the girl said. She ran so fast that the ninjas fell on their own, and it looked very surprising. The girl's dog growled very loudly. She was furious with everything that was happening and wanted to scare away the enemies with herself. What if? Why not try it? Oh no, right in front of me stood their ninja who was already swinging at me. You need to act quickly and carefully. Either this or you will die. They did this, and with very angry eyes they looked at the one who wanted to kill them. And he was also furious. It seemed to them that it was not a man, but a monster who was looking at them. Their enemy looked at them. Do they have pupils? For the first time they see them at all, she didn't think that they were really people. They are people, but very ruthless. They all jumped from the trees to the ground, and when they all did this, the ground noticeably shook from such tension. The dog jumped a little but didn't pay much attention to it, but the girl heard very well and became even more wary. The girl ran as fast as she could because her life depended on it. She only heard the whistle from the shuriken and the creaking of the snow, which knocked her out of her thoughts. Running through the forest, she raised her head and saw the terrible face of the enemy. From fear, the girl almost turned to stone and screamed so that everyone who was there heard it. A lot of warriors fell to the ground because of this fierce battle. Many weapons were no longer lying on the ground. A lot of arrows flew out of the girl's bow, and many ninjas died due to mortal wounds. The companion turned to her and said that the Bona ran as quickly as possible because her arrows were running out. But how can she deprive her of a friend and run away like a coward? She needs to come up with something urgently. The Sagittarius's thoughts were only that either they would die together or only one would survive. There were no other options. So she said that it would be better for her to die than for them to die together. Well, Should a girl just take the dog and leave? Will she die without her or not? But the look was very persistent. The girl knew that she would die with her or herself. How can she leave her friend? Her thoughts are about the same as her friend. But she still doesn't want to leave, but she needs to. Run quickly, said the warrior girl. They will both die, and the messages will remain with the enemies, so you need to escape yourself. The girl is very angry and wanted to ask the dog what to do. She cannot leave her friend to certain death. The dog whined something in the girl's ear. No one but her understood this dog. A lot of rustling noises were heard from the forest. The enemies were close again. We needed to decide quickly. She must run. Otherwise she will die along with her, as much as one can think. But still, this decision is very difficult. Both girls understood that either they would both die or one would die, and the other would go into the dark forest alone. She was not at peace in her soul. She had never had such a difficult choice, but she had to choose. Thinking, she shouted that the shooter would go with her, because she would not act like a little rat. Taking her friend by the jacket, she showed a gesture that they were leaving only together, and no one would be left to face certain death. Although the warrior girl wanted to live, it was not her duty to protect the carrier. She would simply run away. She is a warrior, not a coward. The young man was very angry because he was given such a choice. It was clear from him that he was not joking and wanted his girlfriend to go with him. Out of anger, he simply closed his eyes and some kind of light appeared. What was happening? Is the doctor really so angry that something is going to happen? There were a lot of incomprehensible things in his head. His head was boiling, and it felt like this guy's head was going to explode. After a lull, he screamed at the top of his voice in pain. Or did something happen? But in any case, a lot of energy came out of him. His dog began to growl and bark very loudly. Did she feel that all was not well with the owner, or was it as if she too had been possessed by a demon? The girl who looked at it all was in great shock. She did not understand what was happening at all, and simply petrified, not knowing whether he needed help, or whether it was better not to touch him now. Yes, this is it. His power has been a long time since he felt it. What a wonderful feeling he experiences. He glows with this power so that no one could understand what was wrong with him. Although the warriors did not understand what was happening at first, they did not begin to languish. They began to attack until the carrier's defense understood what was happening. But some ninjas, like the doctor's protector, stood and did not help understand what was happening. They should be fearless, but now this is not the case. And one moment, it was as if there was an explosion. Some lightning began to fly throughout the air. But the girl could not do anything. She did not understand how this was possible. "Yeah, my strength," the doctor shouted. He felt the power that had been hidden in him for a long time. He had long wanted to use it, and here was this opportunity. The young man's companion began to react and ran towards the guy, thinking that something had happened to him. Now he will show these pathetic warriors what real strength is. After this, the doctor tried with all his might to hit the ground with his fist. But what would come of it? Hit! It was very loud. It seems that everyone who was there must have gone deaf from it. The guy's dog was no less scared than everyone else. She was afraid for her owner, but she couldn't do anything. An incredible amount of energy was expelled from the guy. A bunch of arrows of lightning scattered throughout the forest, and no one understood what was happening now. Lightning spread throughout the forest. Everyone who was there saw it, and everyone was afraid of the consequences. While the warriors stood there, not in a misunderstanding of what kind of lightning it began to strike the ground, is it really possible that something will happen now? A lightning storm began in the forest. Lightning blew up trees and made a mess that night. An avalanche of snow scattered from the doctor's strength. It felt like something terrible was about to happen. Stones from the frozen snow began to fly from such force, and all the ninja could do was watch out of fear. While they stood and watched, all these stones began to fly straight at them. Some dodged, but there were so many of them that it was difficult to do it. From such force, all the ninjas who were there almost flew. The lightning lifted the snow in themselves. It began to snow, due to which many were lying in the snow. They were at a loss as to what ordinary snow was doing to them now. It fell and fell, so that some warriors were already in a coffin under the snow. But they could not do anything since the doctor's strength was against their strength. Just nothing. And then the doctor's companion understood. "We need to act." She began to run away from the snow, shouting to the doc that she was now raking them in. "Remember, your speed is no less important than your attack." The words of a wise sensei. "Run!" She shouted to the young man, realizing that they themselves could now die. She screamed at the top of her voice. The snow was flying at such a speed that it was extremely difficult to dodge no matter how hard she tried. But she was able to do it because of her hard training. The girl ordered the guy to urgently run away. Otherwise, they would now be covered with a pile of snow, and they would drown in it like hundreds of warriors. Suddenly, some kind of light appeared from the snow. Again! Something will happen again right now, but what? Even worse? We won't survive in this case. A moment later, the doc and the dog fly out of the avalanche of snow, and it all looked very epic and beautiful, but in this case, you don't need to run. Flying in the air, the guy shouted to his companion to move faster because who knows, maybe she won't have time, or she will be crushed. He heard the voices of the owner howl and the dog, who was now seriously frightened by what was happening. Even more epic, the guy landed and began to slide across the ice. Sliding on the ice, he only thought about what would happen to the girl as a warrior, because she couldn't fly away. Suddenly she saw that she herself was coping well. She smiled and calmed down a little. Adrenaline rose to the skies. "How cool is this?" the young man shouted to himself. Literally, in an instant, he slipped tens of meters, and it was difficult to follow him. When the doc was driving, he shouted to his companion not to lag behind, because he saw that she was still behind. She heard what they told her, but could not run faster because she was already trying her best. What's happened? He took off again. Is this really a cliff? And where will they fall? After they fell, the girl and the doc realized that they were in some kind of village. There were quite a few people here, and it seemed they didn't even notice them, as if they weren't there. But then the villagers suddenly ran towards the strangers and finally saw them. The dog, seeing the stranger, growled and almost bit the villager. "What kind of mad dog is this?" said one of them. "Why did you come?" Hearing this, the guy took a stone out of his backpack and showed it to him. He understood what this stone meant and that they knew everything about it. The men were very surprised and asked where she got it from, but then they realized that it doesn't matter where it comes from. The main thing is that she has it. Everyone who saw this stone in the hands of an ordinary youth was very shocked and could not say a word. The girl who accompanies the guy looked at the stone and couldn't understand what it was and why everyone was so shocked. Finally, the resident collected his thoughts and invited him to come to them. Everyone worshipped them, and the young man's companion could not understand what was happening now and why everyone was so tense. Everyone they saw bowed to them and greeted them with such respect because of some kind of stone. The dog had a dislocated paw. It stopped ending, and she just lay down because she was tired. The doctor told the girl not to worry too much. We will cure her. But she felt something was wrong that could happen to the dog. She was in the backpack. Suddenly, the guy remembered how in a past life he operated on a woman, and the same situation will happen with a dog. Then that woman was very ill. She had a tumor that needed to be urgently removed, and the doc saved her. He will never forget the face of that woman because it was writhing in pain and no medicine helped. And now the dog. And she also needs to be saved, so what? It will have to be. It was late night. While everyone was sleeping, the doctor began to operate on the dog. This will be difficult for the guy, because previously he only operated on people. But the doctors from the village did everything as if this were happening to them every day. The dog was injected with a sleeping pill and slept deeply, and it's good that she doesn't feel this pain now. They operated for a long time because morning is already coming and they still have to work and work. Everyone is very tired, but they still do it because it's necessary. The patient always comes first. The young man felt dizzy. What was happening again? Seizures again? Again, will he really destroy this village with his enormous strength? But no, he just touched the dog and started petting it. He wanted to cure it. Half an hour later, the operation ended very successfully. The doctors, with smiles on their faces, thanked each other for the success and work of everyone. A man from the crowd of doctors shouted gratitude to the guy for his help because 2 hands are never superfluous. One of the colleagues became thoughtful and started asking him if he was a doctor, because she didn't know at first glance that such a young man could help them. The doctors said that for a poor people's cave it was quite sanitary, and the young man agreed with them. He saw that despite the fact that they were poor, they kept order. They talked about this, that they know that they are poor, but not pigs, and maintaining order is a must. Indeed, poverty does not mean disorder. They are great for doing at least something for their hospital, so to speak. Gradually, the guy began to operate on people who were seriously ill or injured, and the doctor thought that their owners had a lot of money. Why weren't they allocating it to hospitals? The doctor was thinking about how much money to ask for his work, because he is the best doctor in the village now. While the guy was thinking, a resident came running and shouted to him that they were calling him urgently. The man told him that the highest one was calling him in their cave. The young man was a little shocked that the highest one could want from him. Walking through the streets, he saw the largest chamber in this district, and it seems that this supreme one lives here. From the beginning, when they passed, it seemed that it was very dark there. Was it some kind of paste or what? But there is no point for them to do this. Walking into the room, he saw a light and 3 people. He was told to sit down with them. The guy was interested. He was told that the highest one was calling him. And there were 3 men here, and who was the one among them? He also pointed out the bags standing in that ward, why there were these bags all over the village, and what was there? The Supreme looked at the guy for several minutes and then told him that they had finished translating the message and that they really needed the guy he called Mr. Benefactor. The doctor was very surprised by this. He could not understand why he was so important to them. The teacher told the young man that treating people is good, but getting involved in serious matters is not advisable. They said that their clan head was attacked by suspicious individuals. He asked again, "Are they attacked?" The doctor's thoughts were that he hoped that this was not what he was thinking about. One of the residents confirmed, saying that the head was trying to return the sacred object. He said that he found a sacred amulet, but he was wounded by some people in black masks. The head received severe internal injuries, as he wrote on the sheet. The guy immediately understood who he was talking about, but was still surprised. It was a heavenly demon. He understood who he was talking about and was in a stupor. This is a terrible warrior who kills everything in his path if he needs something. He didn't spare any of his sacrifices. That's why he was a demon. The guy got goosebumps from him. The young man thought and said that he would help them. There was no problem with that, although it was a little scary, but the doc understood his strength. As it turned out, the one who spoke was the deputy chief, and he nervously looked at the sheet and reread it again and again. He said that the head was unlikely to survive with such injuries. He was really worried about it. But the guy thought that everything should have been different in the original. Everyone who was there bowed to the young doctor and remained silent until one of them spoke. The man said that he understands that the doctor has just come from surgery, but they really need help. Every single person in that room bowed only to him, and the guy was a little shocked. Even their chief deputy evaded and asked for help from the doctor The guy was shocked and told them that he would think about it because the task was difficult. The man shouted that it was urgent because anything could happen to the head and said that he would pay any amount for it. The young man agreed anyway and said that he was eating, and he thought about it all. He thought that he would still have to fight this very demon. And somewhere beyond the snowy forests, not far away, there was a large mountain. In the depths of this snowy forest, there were very large forests, and behind them they hid. There were huge dark caves hiding there, and one of these caves was very strange. There was a lot of blood in it. Was it really some kind of witch that was wounded, or another animal? In the far distant depths, a quiet groan was heard. A lot of weapons were scattered in this cave. A little closer, an even more precise sound of groans was heard, and it was already clear that this was not an animal. This was the same demon that the doc had told the residents about. He was very wounded and exhausted from his wounds. He fought with someone, but with whom and who could wound such a powerful demon? It was he who moaned, groaned from the pain that the battle with the unknown brought. He thought that he could finish off the old man. Just hit him a little harder. But his doubts at that moment ruined him. As it turned out, the head of the village had a very fragile heart, and he could not resist a small child who was crying. After all, he shouldn't have done this. But the scream and crying of the child was able to break the old man. Therefore, the man took the child with him in the hope that he would find one of his relatives. Those same ninja demons had been watching him and the child for a long time. They thought that the old man could fall for such a thing. The chief of the warriors began to tell everyone that this old man was not worthy to be the head of such a clan, because he should be callous and not fall for such things. That same demon reminded everyone of the rule, demons should not have emotions. 10 minutes later, the child took out a sharp sword with poison from his pocket and was ready to insert it right into the old man's back. He would pay for falling for such a scam. Finally, the approaching demon inserted a sword right into the back of the head of the inhabitants, from which the old man sank in pain and sat down. The child fell from his shoulders, and the warriors immediately jumped out of the trees. The old man's thoughts were that he had failed. How could he trust some child with such tasks? But still he was with him, and repelled the attacks of the approaching ninjas. And they were greatly surprised at him. How could he fight back like that with poison in his back? Each warrior tried to hit the elder with at least something, but he did not give in, and was stronger than any poison. 1, 2, 10, it was all right for him. He had to fight off every last one. When, as he thought, he had repulsed all the warriors, he could barely turn around in pain, but still did it. The little demon looked at the man with a very surprised look, because the poison was very strong and he killed everyone. Turning to the child, he thought he looked at with very angry eyes. He thought he was saving him, but it turned out he was betrayed. "It's time to deal with you, little asshole," said the old head, not seeing that there was another one left behind him. The demon quickly took out his sword and ran straight to the man. He wanted to protect his accomplice. But the chapter is not as simple as he thought. He saw the warrior but did not immediately show it. The ninja's thoughts were that he would now finish off this tenacious old man. And the man himself thought about what he should do now so as not to die from this scoundrel. "Do you think it's so easy to kill me, little guy?" he said. The guy was already a few meters away from him and was ready to do what he had to do. When the torment almost reached the head, the warrior immediately felt something. He instantly felt pain from the fact that the old man repelled what the guy thought was a hidden blow. From such a strong blow from the elder, the young warrior flew several meters away. After that, he fell into a huge hole in which there was a hole into a dark abyss. The hands of the old head were already shaking. He was wounded with poison, and at the same time he had to fight off the scoundrels who arranged it. A few hours later he woke up. Opening his eyes, he asked himself, why is he so strong? Because he was severely wounded and with poison. His head hurt terribly, and at first the guy couldn't open his eyes because of this. He thought about everything that happened to him and his group. Opening his eyes, he had a very strange feeling, and something flashed before his eyes. It was the past, but he couldn't remember what exactly it was because of his larger head. He remembered himself with some boy he thought was unfamiliar. How my head is cracking, but some memories still come. And at the same time, the doctor was in the Temple of the Inhabitants, which was built over generations. There were a lot of interesting things here, animals in the pools and all sorts of other things, but the guy didn't need it. He looked at the people here. For some reason, almost all of them had pigtails on top. Maybe they are forced to walk like that? In some corners, the young man noticed actors. Here every day there are some theatrical scenes, and many people actually watch them. But the young doctor didn't need to see the theater. He had tasks. He must find some herbs for the hike, and in order to find the head of the village. "This is what I need," the guy said to himself, looking at the different herbs. Having found these herbs, he did not stop because this is not all he needs. He rummaged through the shelves, looking for what he would need to cure the elder. There was a lot of nonsense there, and he thought for a long time about what to take. On the shelves there were bags, boxes, and glasses with herbs. Almost all of them were familiar to the doctor, but there were also some that were not clear to him. You had to take only the essentials with you because the guy wouldn't be able to run and jump quickly with luggage on his back. The young man was thinking about what road was ending for him, what awaited him, and with whom he would have to fight. "It's all I need," the guy said, holding herbs tied in a rag in his hands. It had to be put somewhere. But where? Without hesitation, the doc remembered his secret pocket in his outfit. Before the hike, he needed to gather his thoughts in order to go on his mission, which he did. He needed to come up with some tactics. Thinking about his boyfriend, he didn't notice that the girl who was accompanying him was standing in front of him. And when he saw him, he said that the girl had to rest because she was very tired on the last trip. And she just smiled and said that she was already normal and who else but her would protect the guy? The young man was in shock, telling her that she had a legitimate weekend, but the shooter didn't even listen. She told him that everything was fine. "I'm telling you, I'm fine," she told him, because the girl really looked like new. The guy thought that this girl never gets tired. He smiled and said that if everything is fine, then he doesn't mind. At that moment, some crazy woman ran in, proving to everyone that she knew the old man would do something. The doctor looked at this girl in surprise, thinking maybe she was some kind of gypsy. She was wearing a lot of strange things. While the woman was screaming towards the people, the guy tried to look at her in more detail, because he was seeing this incomprehensible psychopath for the first time. He looked at it for about 5 minutes, and every second he was more and more surprised. There were so many things on it. These knots. The guy didn't understand what they meant, but there had to be some meaning. They reminded me of something, but the young man couldn't remember what exactly. This woman had a huge scar on her face and looked to be at least 30 years old. And then it dawned on the guy. He realized that this could be the head of a new generation boar. She screamed like crazy. Is she so worried about the main thing, or is it just her? It's not clear. But from her voice, clothes, and manner of communicating with people, it was clear that the young man was not mistaken. She was like all the main ones. The guy didn't hear what he said there, but people all listened to him very carefully, and some even answered without fear of her. This woman had a very great talent for martial arts since childhood, and by the age of 20, she had mastered the powerful boar technique. She was engaged in them all the time. She was associated only with martial arts. She always trained to be stronger than others. But when the head disappeared, she seemed to be stuck. She began to behave like a psychopath. Perhaps she was very worried about what could happen to him. But she did not give up searching for the main thing, because for her, He is a special person. This incredible woman searched for years for the culprit in all this and finally found. She hid for more than 1 year to punish the one who did this to him. This warrior is truly incredible because she was able to lead Yoharyun himself into a dead end. Not everyone could do this. She is really very strong. She had a lot of rivals, and she crushed each of them like seeds. And the doctor himself was afraid of this woman. She beat up thousands of people, and she crushed everyone who got in her way like goosebumps. There were also glorious battles where she herself had to sweat, but she still won no matter what. How many weapons that the owner will no longer pick up have fallen to the ground because of this combat vehicle? A lot of people tried to kill this unbroken warrior, and no one managed to repair even a drop of it. With simple martial arts, she defeated people who had sharp swords, more than a spear, and many other weapons this woman's enemies had. Without sparing anyone, she killed everyone in her path, everyone who even tried to simply end her life. But there was one demon who almost did it. He defeated what seemed like such a powerful machine. Then she said that she never thought that this would happen, and she would spend her whole life on this. The whole world will fall with laughter when they hear this, she then said to that same demon. But the doctor thought about whether this was necessary. Why did she do it then? After talking with the residents, the woman decided to approach the guy. When the future head did this, she told the doctor. She approached the guy, greeted him, and said that she remembered him but didn't know where, although she smiled at him. The young man said hello and said that she once saved Hwangu, his dog. The guy again caught his thanksgiving. However, the woman said that his food is excellent, and what the old man always does is play with the dog. As it happened in the book, she stole food from the dog, and she herself said that the elder would not die so easily. She was sure that he was alive. After this, the woman asked the doctor if she could trust his skills. The guy confidently said yes. After that, they decided that they could set off because the road was not easy and long, and they had a lot to walk. She thought for a long time about what to say to the guy, and he thought about it. After a while, the woman said that they had to go. She shouted, "Forward!" They needed to move forward as quickly as possible, although the old man was tenacious. Time was not ironclad. The parents of this fighting machine were very evil villains, through which they committed many cruel and illegal acts. It all started when the head of the boar, Ilgol, beat them up, because such people cannot be left alive. At first, the old man did not know that this girl was the heir of those people who died at his hands. And the girl herself did not want to say this, because she was afraid that something might happen to her or her parents. One day, she was called Snowflower, but when she lost her mind, she was given a new nickname, Snowdog. Sol Kyung spent 8 years searching and 2 years preparing what she thought about whenever she wanted. She didn't think at all when she was doing all this, how she could reason logically and do such a thing. What was she thinking when she attacked the inhabited demon? Did this woman really think that she could defeat him too? It even sounds a little funny. Sol Kyung had been waiting for the doctor for about 10 minutes. She was tired of it and told him to hurry up because the road was long. The time had come for them to go. The doctor thought a lot about whether he had taken everything because it was very important. This mission was the most important one in the guy's life. When opening the gate, a very loud noise was heard, and something as if magical was shining in a golden color at the exit. The young man and the warrior girl were not so surprised as if they didn't care at all, and many residents were scared, so some ran away. Pek Rin Yun Song. This was the same doctor who treated many warriors. He was loved and respected by almost everyone. He was a strong doctor, saved many important lives and the lives of young warriors, but his past. At the same time, Chin Cheon-hee was with Wang Kok-young, the owner of the Baekrin Lazaret Jagal Rig, went on a business trip to treat the warriors participating in the Dragon and Felix Convention. 4 Tanju, who worked under the leadership of Chagal Rila, replaced each other and treated various types of external injuries. All the warriors who were wounded in battle had to lie in this doctor's hospital, where they were treated by very strong doctors. Everyone who was seriously injured overnight, without exception, must be cured, from severe injury to minor injury. All the most terrible wounds were treated by that same famous doctor. His strength was incredibly great. As soon as he entered the wards with the sick, everyone greeted him because they respected their savior. They were really happy to see him, but not all of them. Some talked to each other about how he should have died long ago. For some reason, they hated him. But one day he received a very strange letter, after which he behaved as if he was not himself. Chagal Rila's concern for the patients was interrupted by the messages that arrived. The writing on that sheet really infuriated the doctor. It flared him up with great anger. He was already some kind of psycho, but after this message he became truly abnormal, and his anger came out like steam. Many people who knew him only as a kind man who treated everyone who needed it were shocked by such a doctor. In recent times, Baek Rin Iwi has become more advanced in martial arts. His form is old meaning fit. I told you that all he had to do was actually become stronger and stronger each time. What was it about the letter that could anger him so much that he even changed his attitude towards his patients? One day his employee came running and shouted "sir" to him, and he did it in vain. After this, the man became very angry. The pupils of his eyes disappeared from anger. It seemed that he was about to crush the guy. But he shouted as loudly as he could, "Mister, wake up!" He shouted to get through to the doctor and not to the man who was ready to destroy everyone in his path. When he woke up, he looked at him as if he really didn't remember what happened to him and what happened just a minute ago. He doesn't know what happened to the doctor, but he asked him to come to his senses because a lot of patients need to be cured. Then the man heard him. The pupils appeared and the anger subsided as if he had really come to his senses. Although at first it was clear that the anger did not want to leave him for a long time, there was still something important in this letter. But in a moment, he pulled himself together, and he didn't radiate as much anger as he had a few minutes ago. He calmed down completely, said the man who already thought that there would be a huge disaster. The young doctor put his hand on the table. He calmed the nerves that remained in him and suddenly said that it was time for him to finish this treatment, because he needs to return. The young man could not understand what this meant, because the Congress was not over yet. The man began to say something about the Congress, but no one really understood him. He was depressed by something, maybe these same messages. As a result, he began to leave and really asked to talk to the head of the union. But how could they without him? They can't treat everyone like this great doctor. What? Come, how are you going to deal with the consequences? The guy told him. But the doc no longer wanted to listen to him. No one and nothing would force him to listen. Something in that message could have angered him so much and made him leave in such a hurry. After the doctor left, the guy quickly moved to read the messages. What could be so terrible there? But he tossed and turned for a long time and could not understand what to write there. He turned this piece of paper in different directions. There were also some signatures. He was completely lost in these letters, and I couldn't understand. What was written here had to be deciphered. There was a hieroglyph key, which means joy. This hieroglyph is used in the name. Everyone was waiting for what the guy would say, what was written there. And the young man turned around and was silent. For a long time, no one could understand what was happening. But the main thing was that they cannot live without this doctor. He treated very complex diseases. Mr. Kakchu, how are we without you? The guy thought to himself. He really understood that this could be the end. And somewhere in the mountains, the voices of those who went to look for the head of the boar, especially this fighting woman, were heard. They all walked through so many huge mountains. Altogether, there were about 15 people, and this is not enough compared to the hikes of this village. As they walked, a dog was heard barking. It was most likely Huanggu. The young doctor knew his voice exactly and understood why she was barking. The head of the new generation led them all and shouted that she heard barking. She needed to hurry. After these words, she ran sharply. The woman felt that the dog knew the way. She needed to speed up. The doctor thought that he also needed to speed up because they couldn't be late. It was very urgent. As she ran, she screamed for everyone to run after her, because as long as they could crawl like worms, they must save the head. Huanggu showed the way all the time and did not remain silent for a second because they believed him. After some time, the dog led them all to a huge ice wall. Huanggu led them to a waterfall that had frozen over in the cold for a long time. Everyone understood what they would have to do. The warrior put the dog on an icy stone, wrapping it in a blanket, and said that it was necessary to quickly break the ice because the dog would freeze. After which, she took her wooden but very rough weapon and moved towards him. It was necessary to hit hard enough to split it. Smiling like crazy, the woman was preparing for this battle, so to speak. At this time, those who were lagging behind or those who were resting ran after them. When everyone gathered, they looked at the rock made of ice. And as it turned out, the warrior woman wanted to break it herself. "We've almost reached it faster," shouted from a group of those lagging behind on the road. They still had a little time left. They ran with all their might so as not to get lost because they don't know the road. And suddenly a strong roar blocked all sounds. It felt like someone or something fell with such force that it could have made such a roar. Madam, how to understand this? She herself broke a mountain of ice for a few seconds. A bunch of fragments, large and small, lay near her, and everyone who was there and saw it was in great shock. She was so strong. Doctors and residents could not understand what happened and how this woman could do such a thing. She pointed to something very large. It was a mountain, but not everyone noticed it because they were across a huge chasm. And she pointed to a huge cave in which most likely there could be an old man. The cave was very cold, stone and icy. It was as if it was not stuffy. All over it there were huge pieces of ice and fragments of stones that had been lying there for years. It was really deep and soulless, but moans of pain could be heard very far away in it, was it really? The cave was so deep that it was simply impossible to reach the end, and because of the huge needles made of ice or llamas, it was too difficult for tall people. And in the depths of this cave sat the same main cabana, wounded and exhausted. The old man seemed to be already dead, but it was possible to save him, but it would be extremely difficult to do so. Nevertheless, the collection of doctors and warriors managed to find the old head. They lit a fire near him because after so much time in such cold mountains, it was very easy to freeze. The lady warrior thought that she was able to do this. She was able to find the head, but she was worried whether it was too late. Taking the hand of the old head, the young man was surprised. It was very cold and almost like ice. Everything is now in the doctor's hands. Only he can save him from such a cold body. The young man sat for a long time holding the elder's hand to understand what was wrong with him and save him. The man looked as if nothing could save him. He was very cold, according to the doctor. But the guy was prevented from concentrating by the sound made by other people in that cave, which is why he turned around and asked them to be quiet. Hearing this, messers, Yong shouted out to them to be quiet. It was so strong that some of the ice there fell from the stone ceiling. The guy understood that he didn't know if he could save him, and said that he didn't know if he could save the old head. All the doctors knew how strong the guy was, because they understood how difficult it all was. The young doctor said that he would try very hard to do everything in his power and hands. He understood how important this old man was to them. At one point, the doc remembered that he had studied the 5-element technique for such cases. Questions rained down from the crowd about whether he was ready to do this, since the guy had only recently learned this technique. And he screamed as much as he could because the young man had practiced this many times and had learned enough. The crowd was in great shock because even though he tried to practice a lot, it was still impossible to learn this technique so quickly. A few seconds later it began. Lightning began to fly in the cave, the real magic of which is incredibly difficult to master. How much magic is not important. What matters is how well you can wield it. And the doctor could do it perfectly. Since then, when the guy's strength was literally like a pea, he tried to mix it, and he succeeded only after a lot of time and attempts. You need to be able to control even a small amount of magic, said the young man. He spent a lot of hours on this. When the guy was ready, he sat down behind the head and understood that he needed to start. And that's what he did. The old man looked as if nothing could save him, only a miracle. The young guy wanted to do this miracle. He had to bring the elder back to life. A few seconds passed, and then the doctor began his magical ritual. Circles of water were already visible. He would do what he had in mind. The guy needs to focus on one magic, the magic of water and fire. It looked easy as the young man did it, but in order to do it all so easily, the young man had to train a lot to achieve such a result. The magic of water surrounded the entire old man. It looked scary and beautiful at the same moment. Some doubted that he would be able to revive the head of the boar, but they did not know what this guy was capable of. After the young man touched the old man with his other hand, sparks of fire appeared and began to reunite with the water. It's as if the river and the fire were combined into one, an incredibly interesting spectacle. Although it was beautiful, the doctor must have been pretty exhausted after this. And so water and fire were combined into one whole. A very bright light shone in the cave, blinding everyone who was there. The sage's eyes sparkled bright yellow and even slightly similar to gold. It already seemed to everyone that the head could not be saved. But the doctor did not think so. In an instant, a junction of very strong magics occurred. Water and fire united, and a blast wave occurred from such force. The guy understood that this was not enough. He needed to finish what he started, or why he was trying would lose its meaning. Therefore, the young man kept his hands on the elder's back until the end. No matter what the blast wave was, no matter how strong the joint was, he still held it. Because it was necessary. It was necessary for their leader to return to the residence, and to fulfill the promise. It would seem that the old man no longer showed that he had a chance to live, but with every second the magic embodied his every cell. The magic brought every dead cell to life as if nothing had happened, as if it had happened. But in order not to kill it, you need to push through internal force, warming each of the vessels. 4 hours later, the guy was still sitting and doing what he had to do. Each of those who were there were surprised at what enormous strength the doctor had. He had been doing the same thing for so long, and was not even tired. But they were also upset that after so much time, nothing had changed. And the man's heiress always asked how things were going with the treatment and why the old man didn't move. She was worried about him more than anyone else. But we had to wait a little longer, because this is not an easy matter, but this woman does not understand anything about medicine. After many hours of tormenting the guy, he finally finished. He was able to defrost and then warm up the vessels of the old head. The doctor felt that everything worked out. He felt how the blood vessels with the muscles softened and blood circulation was restored. A moment later, everyone in the cave heard a heavy wheezing and coughing. Fear woke up and began coughing up a lot of blood. Everyone immediately came closer to him to find out how he was and do something to help the young man. A lot of blood came out of him, which he seemed to be holding in his mouth. But in fact, this is really normal. After this, it was generally impossible to survive. Of course, the one whom the old man raised as his own daughter was most afraid of. She asked a lot of questions because of her worries, asking if it was normal for him to spit blood. She truly loved him as a father. Everything was fine with him, and this was all due to the fact that heat is being revived in the body. Because of this, some vessels break because they cannot withstand the stress. Every single doctor in this cave was in a huge misunderstanding, because everything worked. After so much time, no one expected anything good, and some even resigned themselves to the death of the old man. It turned out that they had overcome the critical condition, but this was only for the moment, because the patient had serious damage to internal organs. The external wound from the sword reached the old man's gut, but fortunately did not hit the vital organs. This was the most important thing. Having learned this, so to speak, the old man's daughter said that it was nice because he was alive. The young man tagged the patient's internal energy, and the procedure was carried out successfully. But there was one small but due to severe frostbite, the patient may not feel the limbs. This was understandable because after sitting in the cold for so long, not only the limbs can be frostbitten, but the whole body. But Mrs. Gyeong angrily shouted that the doctor should have cured the elder. After all, the young man put energy into him. Why then is he unhealthy? But unfortunately, this was not treatment, but first medical aid. And the treatment itself is only beginning now, and the doctor was preparing for it. Every doctor there knew that frostbite is worse than stab wounds, so they understood for a long time that this treatment had not even begun yet. The head of the boar stayed in a temperature of -4 degrees for several days, and the fact that he survived at all is already a huge miracle. And due to the circulation of energy, his energy pathways disintegrated. The guy claimed that if the old man was forced to move even a little now, he would become disabled for the rest of his life. Gyeong was very worried about the old man. She understood that he needed to be treated here, and they had no other choice if they wanted to leave the head without a disability. She was so worried that she said to tell her as soon as she needed something, she was ready to do anything for the old man. But the guy told her that they had everything they needed. All they needed was determination. But what determination he was talking about was not understood by everyone. While the doctor and woman were talking, the old man lay helpless and subconsciously heard the words of all the people in the cave. The young man said that in order to save the elder, it was necessary to sacrifice his right hand, left foot, 5 fingers, and part of the leg below the ankle. Mrs. Gyeong was very unpleasantly shocked because these are so many important endings for life, but they have nothing to do because the guy knows everything for sure. All the warriors at that time became quiet because they understood that this was all too serious, and now everything had to be done to save the leader. But at what cost? The doctors themselves understood this from the beginning, as did the young doctor who gave first aid to the old man. Everything was so terrible that the woman understood it all, but because she was afraid for the head, she asked if the doctor was sure of what he was saying. They talked about this for some time, and suddenly the words of the hoarse old man were interrupted by their dialogue, and suddenly everything turned in his direction, especially Mrs. Gyeong, and the doctor was also looking at him intently because he had to watch the patients carefully. He wanted to ask the old man how he was feeling, but suddenly he was interrupted. The man kept saying something quietly, and no one really understood what he was saying, and his heiress immediately rushed to ask if he really woke up and how he was. Even at such a moment, the old sage joked with her and teased her that the voice of the dead would even wake him up. She became an heiress, but she could not give people an example of a normal person, which is why the woman was mistaken for a psychopath. All the people, hearing the leader's voice, came up and asked him something about how he felt. But it was pointless. The old man did not have the strength to answer. While the man was coming to his senses, the young man was examining him. After all, this old man had just risen from the dead, so to speak, although such and such a doctor was not capable of such a thing. The woman again shouted to the old man that the doctor was a charlatan and wanted to cut off his limbs. But the old man didn't listen to her at all. He giggled and thought that this was expected. It's clear that if such a doctor treats him, he would survive 100%. Such a famous doctor as a white dragon could not be mistaken in the elder's opinion, because he is a very experienced and good doctor. He also added out loud that he understands that it will now be fashionable to save him only by cutting off his limbs. To which the young man agreed with him because this is the best option at this time. Such a knife in the back, my God. Old man, do you seriously agree with him? A voice rang.